So I think this is a very exciting topic, and as Paula said, the planning call was also very exciting. But we have to keep the time. I was told that we have to keep the time. So to set the tempo, we'll start with the first topic, and I would like to ask you for 3 ingredients that you think are essential for a successful and impactful startup corporate collaboration. So I will start first. My 3 ingredients are patience, and luck.
For me, it's communication, flexibility, and tenacity.
I would probably say alignment. I would pick grit. I was about to say revenue or sales, but I'll change that to progress after a brief discussion before.
I'm going to go with authority, alignment, and autonomy.
I think now we have a really good set of ingredients to cook the impactful collaboration soup. And then another important topic, like when we start a collaboration, it's very important to align the expectations. Because, you know, whether we come from research, let's say industrial research, academic research, smaller company startups, large corporate, we might see the world in different colors or from different angles. So the question I would like to discuss now is how to best align the incentives and expectations for impact. From my point of view, the first ingredient, of course, this aligning of expectations has several steps, but the first step for us has been to understand the motivation and, let's say, KPIs, to put it in a more corporate language, of each parties. Because this can often be the point where the misalignment might happen, and then if you start on this trajectory, then you don't end up doing an impact. So it's important for us, in my experience, it was important to understand, okay, why are we doing this? Why are we doing this as a startup? Why is our partner corporate doing this? And after learning some harsh lessons, we started applying this, and we got a much better experience. So that was my experience with this.
What was the question?
So, how to best align incentives and expectations
I was
in
going
order
to
to
jump on the alignment bandwagon, and then I was like, wait, was there a broader question?
Yeah, well, exactly.
Yes.
It is about aligning expectations and incentives in a collaboration between startup and corporate.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's my first ingredient, communication. I think it's super important to communicate your expectations, but also what their expectations are. Where are they not aligning? And I think it's really, really important to identify your stakeholders and who your champions are. Because if you don't have somebody, so I'm, Volvo Group, I'm coming from the corporate side of it. If you don't have somebody fighting for you in that big company, you're going to get lost in the noise. So identify your stakeholders, define success, identify where the gaps are between what you guys want and actually do. I mean, I cannot tell you how many startups we've had come in where we put forward a particular problem space and they say, oh, we can totally solve that. And then once we dig into their tech, they cannot. But they're promising, like, we can do it, we'll change everything to solve this problem. Don't do that. That's not a good fit for anyone. And then you guys end up going off, veering off course. So I think communication from the get-go is, for me, the most important.
For sure, communication, and relate to that, there are many ways that you can collaborate with a corporation. I mean, they can be a stakeholder, they can invest in you, they can be a channel to market, they can be a customer themselves, you can do some joint development. So be clear about those expectations. And I think that is, we in the Nordics might be a little bit too timid. Be clear, be explicit. I think here in the US, it's people are more used to it. What's in it for me type of question. So be clear about that and with your expectations. I would say that's the main part.
So one of the really fun things about tech-driven startups is you're so excited about your tech, and you come and you say, "Let me tell you about my tech. It's so cool." When really the thing that a large company cares about is the business value. And so you need to make sure that you know what the value is to the business, whether they're partnering with you, whether they're acquiring with you, whether they are just a customer. You need to know what problem you're solving, how much money you're making or saving them, and who cares. And then you tell them that. They don't care about the how follows, but it's the business value. And particularly when you're communicating this across cultures, do not presume that they're going to communicate this in the same way you do. I'm going to make a book recommendation, The Culture Map by Aaron Meyer. Please go look at that. And you will almost certainly find things that are surprising to you about things that you were taking for granted when whether you're communicating with US or Canadian or Mexican North American potential partners, or Japanese partners, or Korean partners, or other parts of Europe. This is something that you actually need to sit down and take into account. And to the communication point, when you have people who have different modes of communication, you have to default to clarity. You have to default to setting everything out and taking nothing for granted. And again, when you're talking to a large company, they don't care about how cool and fancy your tech is. They don't care about how many, well, they do care about whether it's patented or not. But they don't care about all the things that you care about. They care, is this material to my multi-billion-dollar business? Or does it have the capacity to become material to my multi-billion-dollar business?
Can I add to that?
Yeah, absolutely.
And don't confuse your customer, the one that is paying you for something, with the user that is using your product or service, and the one that is benefiting from the use of it. Those three can be the same organization, the same person, but it can also be completely different individuals. I mean, I made that mistake myself a little bit too many times, pitching something super hard, but to the completely wrong person. A perfect pitch, just that they didn't care. We make a fair amount of sales through system integrators. They don't care about the quality of our products. They're not the users of it. It's not that they're expensive. Those are going to be replaced. If you do an analysis of water, the integrators or the OEMs are not the ones using that. So think about who's your customer, who's the user, and who's benefiting, and adjusting your pitch to those stakeholders.
Not to say that not all three of those aren't important, but to his point, yeah, adjust your pitch to who you're pitching to.
Great, thank you. I think there's a lot to take in there, and it's very, I would like to stress once more that it's indeed very important that the incentives, the expectations are aligned, and the viewpoints are also aligned in order to achieve impact. But then, even before this alignment, when we initiate such a collaboration, question is, okay, how does it even happen? Because a startup working with a large corporate, maybe global corporate, it's like a mouse with an elephant. Might not work out well for the mouse, or for the elephant maybe. And so I think it's very important to stress here the importance of having some sort of a balanced framework that would protect both sides and actually enable this. And here I have a story that fits very well, I would say, because Maggie is from a company that is involved in this story. So CanaryBit, we are working with the enterprise market. Our product is targeting the enterprise market. And in order to really show this, that we are solving data monetization through cybersecurity, we need to have a good pilot that we can demonstrate this with. In our case, the pilot is between Volvo Group, Ericsson, Telia, which is a mobile operator, and the city of Gothenburg. So you have a good start. You have 3 very large companies. You have a public authority, and also Mobility X Lab, that is the automotive innovation hub. Good. So what do you think happens when you put them at the same table and start to do something? It's not that easy to align everyone and make everyone agree on how we're going to work together. So that took a while to figure out until we came up with a solution. So in finance, when you have this kind of like more complex setups, there's a term called special purpose vehicle. But usually then that's, involves a lot of lawyers and so on. Until we realized, like, well, our special purpose vehicle could be an innovation project. And in Sweden, we're very lucky to have an agency called Vinnova, which funds this kind of projects. And we thought, like, this is something that we can reuse for this specific purpose. We have the purpose to make a demonstration, and everyone knows this framework, knows how to operate, and so on. So it worked out perfectly so far. The pilot is ongoing. We're building it. It's a 1-year pilot. But I think, as far as I know, not every country, not every jurisdiction, not every setup has this kind of, institution. And then, I guess here, if a startup works with a corporate, then you need to have pretty good funding for some lawyer time in order to protect yourself. So how do you think startups should think, about these frameworks, and how should they protect themselves? How should the corporate protect themselves from the startups? Could you tell us some stories?
No, I cannot tell you stories. I am legally required to not tell you stories. I would say, the word framework insinuates that you would bring the same thing every time you're working with company, no matter who the company is. And I don't think that's the way it works. So this goes to my second ingredient, which is flexibility. Do not hand over the keys to the kingdom. Do not surrender your IP, no matter how big the elephant in the room is. But find a way around. Find a way to work with it. You also can't stand there and stomp your feet and say, I'm not going to do it, because we'll just move on to the next startup. That's fine. You can do whatever it is you're going to do. So flexibility. And also my third ingredient, tenacity. Keep coming, keep working at it. The legal, sorry, I'm thinking of a project that we're working on right now that was supposed to launch on next Monday. And it just got pushed to May because some lawyer came in at the last minute and said, hold on, friends, and just threw a complete spammer in the entire thing. And so we have to go back to the drawing board with legal. So tenacity and flexibility, but it's going to be, know your worth, but also, have really good lawyers.
And money to pay them.
And lawyers are expensive. I know that. I used to be working for one of our customers, so I was quite used to being pushing down terms and conditions to companies like the one I'm working for now, or even smaller companies. So now I'm on the receiving end of that instead. And in those discussions where I feel that it's been working well on both ends is when you try to understand why they have the terms or the conditions that they have in there, what is really important for them, and where can you have some wiggle room. And if you're working with the bigger corporations where there is no wiggle room, then at least my recommendation would be that either move on, because then I think that culture will reflect that relationship in other areas as well, or get used to it, but don't expect it to change. But try to have a discussion with them where there is wiggle room in those legal contracts, and why they have those conditions in there. And then you have a better understanding of where you can negotiate and not. And those legal standard templates that those corporations have, they see it as a first bid. It's not the final offer. It's the first. It's their standard template.
You got to keep those in-house lawyers busy. You're paying them the big bucks. So I've got 3 points. The first one is, as a startup, your advantage is that you move fast. That is not always a feature for a large company because there is a pace at which they can move and they have to be careful. You are a risk, and we can get into more details on exactly what kind of risk you bring, but if you are a multi-billion-dollar company working with a small company, you have to make sure that they're not going to expose your data, create a cybersecurity hole, do something that is going to get you in some sort of legal trouble. So there's a reason that they throw all this lawyering and due diligence at it, but that means that frequently your timing is out of sync. That also means that frequently companies will sandbox innovation or attempt to sandbox innovation. And so you may talk to a large company and they say, here, go talk to our innovation group. And you will spend lots of time creating a pilot with this innovation group, and you'll be very excited, and it will go great, and then it will go nowhere because it is a sandbox that is not connected to any other parts of the company. And maybe they don't know, or they do not have the connections to the people in the company that could potentially take on board your solution. So this is where that whole alignment piece comes in, and the authority. The people in the room, do they have the authority to say, all right, this pilot went well, let's roll it out to something bigger? If they don't, this is a waste of your time, and your time is your most valuable asset. So you need to be, this is honestly one of those things that you learn by doing. You get a feel for it, you start figuring out what questions to ask, you start figuring out if your risk profiles are similar or too different, just like you were saying. But you cannot waste time, particularly if this is a large portion of your time and effort. One of the things that I tell people is your goal is to not have any one customer or one partner be over 50% of your revenue. That's not always an option. But if you have these big partnerships with big companies, if they say no, you're kind of screwed. So your goal is to diversify as much as possible. That's not always an option. You get the opportunity, you feel like you have to take it. Maybe that's true. Maybe they're the one, maybe Volvo is the one that you need, or maybe they're the only ones who said yes. But the second you land them, you start taking that and saying, we're working with Volvo, you should work with us too, because you want to dilute their fraction of your time, attention, and money to less than 50%. So that if they leave, for whatever reason, you have options and it does not completely screw your company over.
I think that's really good advice. We'll follow that. Okay, so now we've talked about some serious stuff, and we actually still have some time, I see, so good, we're on schedule. So yes, that's great, and then we can end up on a lighter note and think about some highlights and cases when things went well. I can start. So in our case, a couple of years ago, even before we met Summit, we already followed his advice, which was, think global from day one. And in our case, being based in Sweden, our first major partner, customer, investor ended up being outside of Sweden, in Italy. We went through an innovation program with Leonardo, which is, let's say, the Lockheed Martin of Italy, quite a large company, and they trusted our cybersecurity solution and went through the innovation program and got an investment from them. So that set us directly on a course of understanding directly how to work with a large corporation, the challenges of that, the culture of a large corporation. But I think it was a good experience and still is. So that was my highlight.
So we've had a lot of highlights. The Innovation Lab is actually relatively new within Volvo Group. Here in the US, we've only been around for 6 years, and we have a sister lab over in Sweden that's been around for, I think, 8 years, pretty new in the ecosystem. We've been able, within the Silicon Valley ecosystem, to really tap into open innovation and the startup ecosystem here. I say the word ecosystem a lot. But we've been able to bring a bunch of new technologies into Volvo, really inform and inspire some of the strategic roadmaps. I've seen the strategic roadmaps changing over the past 6 years based on some of the information that we're bringing back to them. So even just from a corporate, humongous standpoint, the speed at which we work here And the forward-thinking technology that we see here is changing the face of what Volvo is doing and how they're looking at what they should be innovating and investing in. We have a lot of examples of small wins. Our biggest win was that one that just got pushed to, hopefully, fingers crossed, next month. Thank you, lawyers. And that one's going to be, I mean, that's immediately revenue generating for Volvo. It's going to be really big for us. So, and we're getting a lot of traction within Volvo, and so they're coming to us and saying, like, what are we missing? What do we not, you know, I always say we like to sit up there in our ivory tower and we think we know everything about trucking that there is to know, and we don't. You don't know what you don't know, and you've got to get on the ground with your users and really investigate what they actually need, not what you think they need. And that has been a huge cultural shift, but it's happening, and so that, I feel like, is a huge win for the Innovation Lab.
Great. So we were speaking about alignment before, and just to set the stage a little bit. Salespeople are lazy. If you come to them and come to the head of sales in a big corporation and say, I have this wonderful thing, your customers will love it. Basically what you're telling them is that please invest some time with me, getting to know our solution, so you can pitch that to your customers, so you can try to spend time to convince them to buy this solution, instead of you just selling more of what you already know to the customers that you already know, where you and you know how to pitch that. So you're asking them to invest a lot of time, and they are lazy. So the one of the success stories that I've been part of was when a partner of ours did the sales work for our salespeople. They went to, in this case, state-owned oil refinery company in Saudi, the one, and they managed to sell their solution to big, huge petrochemical complex, and they gave that business to the salespeople in that region. They gave them a percentage of that sale, and all of a sudden they got an incentive to learn about that solution. They got to see the traction with the customers firsthand and say that, oh, the customers love this. And when I was down there for some time, whenever we had a new customer visiting, we always pitched that solution to those customers as well. We saw that the more customers who saw that, the more they liked it. And at the end of the day, that business ramped up. And at a certain stage, we felt that this is a business that we want to keep in-house, and we bought the company. So, and I think for me, the trigger was when that company made a sale, but gave it to our salespeople, lowering the threshold, and segueing from that into selling the business.
So I'm going to give a brief personal anecdote and then a more general one. So my startup project sharing website called Instructables was acquired by Autodesk in 2011. And there are a bunch of things that they said that they wanted. They wanted to understand hobbyists because they sold to professional engineers all of the 3D design tools. And they wanted to understand what those people do in their spare time because they were developing a suite of consumer-focused products. And all of those people used our website. So that's a short term why they acquired us. Longer term, they had all of these theories about how they're going to use the tutorial site to make it much easier to learn tutorials for all of the much more complicated products. So we started working on that right away. How many years do you think it took? Up. So we started out about 5 years after acquisition. I think we managed to add it to Tinkercad, which is focused at children and hobbyists 3D modeling, and then worked up the food chain. So I actually stayed. We were really a poster child for acquisition, and I stayed there almost 10 years. Our CEO managed to stay there for about 8. before ducking out to found another company. Our first hire is still there running this piece that's been folded into the education arm. But my point is, you want to have short-term wins, medium-term, and long-term. And you want to make sure that you're able to provide something immediately as well as sell that longer-term dream, because it always takes longer for really stupid legal reasons. I can tell you all about contest law across the globe, which I never expected to be an expert in. Privacy law, children's online privacy law. So there's always something. It's usually legal, and it will take longer. But the thing that you are good at as a startup is being flexible and being fast. And so as long as you are an independent entity, you can take care of those things. One of the things we were talking about earlier is I'm working with a startup whose first client was NASA. And so in order to land that first client, he had to absolutely nail his privacy and his cybersecurity. And so he had those in place to work with the US government, specifically NASA. And that means that every time he now goes to a Fortune 1000 company, they say, oh, great, check. It's so easy because government is the hardest one to sell to, particularly when you're talking about space and defense and aerospace and things like that. So one of the things you can do now, while you are still small, while you are still agile, is make sure that, especially if you want to sell or partner with some of these folks who have high standards, you meet and exceed them now, because it's so much easier than to pivot later and try and add it in.
Thank you. I think all of this was, excellent advice, excellent highlights and stories. Thank you very much. I hope that you learned a lot, and there's a lot to digest, I guess. And I guess we can continue with the program. Thank you very much. Oh, questions? Yes, I was looking at the time. Sorry.
More of a statement rather than a question, maybe. But for a startup as ours, I think you can kind of flip the coin on expectations and alignment, and just, in our case, start with looking at constraints. And then, in a lot of cases, when we collaborate with a big company, it's mostly about man hours being put in. And then something like Maggie said happens, where a lawyer comes in and things take a month longer or whatever. You need to account for that. So when they tell you we've got, let's say, for example, 100 hours a month totally that we can give you, we usually kind of put a margin on that, and we say, okay, they got like 70 hours or 60 hours. And that helps us a lot with kind of planning for the real case, rather than thinking we'll be done in 6 months and then we're going to be done in 12 months. And I think that's just a tip from me, who's not very experienced but still has gone through this kind of thing.
The other thing is companies have reputations. Talk to people who have worked with these companies before. And then you'll find out if you need to have a 1.5x multiplier, a 10x multiplier, or whether this is the right choice at all.
My ex-husband used to be like that. If he would tell me it's only going to be 10 minutes, I knew to multiply by 3.
Hi, Christy. Mainly for you, Christy. Stefano Cucchiella, CTO and co-founder of CanaryBit. Quick question. You mentioned about the sandbox environment that the big organizations put you in, and there is, nothing else beyond that sandbox. First of all, how do you get the grasp of understanding that there is nothing beyond that from the very beginning?
You ask if you can talk to people in the business unit.
Okay, directly. Okay.
And if they can't get you those people in the business unit to talk to, they absolutely are not going to be able to get them for you downstream.
Okay.
Because you need those business requirements from people in the business unit that you hope to sell to downstream.
Okay. So straight.
I'm going to add to that, because we actually do. We do that. We put you in a sandbox because a lot of times we can't give you real data, and the ability to give you real data is actually what's holding up even just the proof of concept. And if we haven't run a proof of concept, how do we even validate the technology, right? So we'll put you in a sandbox environment. But this goes back to that communication part at the very beginning when I said align your stakeholders. This is the stakeholder alignment. Bring in the business area, not just the innovation lab. So that's what our job is the innovation lab, is to make sure, I always say we're a bridge between the startup and the corporate stakeholders, and you guys are speaking, not only are you speaking different languages, like you're reading from totally different playbooks, you need someone to be like an interpreter almost, right? Making sure that everyone is alignment every step of the way. And so, yeah, if you're only talking to the innovation lab and you haven't spoken to any sort of champion within the business area at all, then you might want to ask for that.
Can you just add to that when Leo was speaking before and about that story of the product manager who stopped that thing? It was not me in that case, but I have a very similar story of our CEO met another CEO, met up here at the other company, what HP, flew down to Zurich to work on a new innovation project. This doesn't make sense, and then we stopped it. And yeah, I'm representing the business unit.
And the thing to keep in mind is that when times are flush and companies have lots of money, they will do things like have a decorative innovation unit that is performing innovation. And then this is where you start getting into the, do I actually have that connection? And then what is the culture of the company? If they're a not invented here company, then they'll never bring you in. So you need to know the reputation, and then you need to test it. Am I getting the access that I need at the right level?
Thank you.